So then I thought, well, lack of motivation. And I thought, well, probably. But motivation is only needed when we need to overcome a block to something. So then you have to look at it and say, well, then what is it that we're needing to overcome that we would need to be motivated? You see, I don't need motivation to go get ice cream. There's no blocks there. I just want it all the time. I don't need someone to motivate me, to get me in the mood and get gonna go. I don't need proper motivation to watch Jurassic Park. If somebody shows the movie, I'm in, right? I don't think it's a secret that I like that movie. Anyways, I don't need motivation. I need motivation to mow my lawn. That's why I have a homeowners association that threatens me with fines, because I wouldn't do it if it wasn't for some motivation. There's an obstacle I have to overcome in order to mow my lawn. So I said, this is what it is. There's something we have to overcome that we need this motivation for. And I believe that what we need to overcome is not fear, it's not ignorance, it's not lack of desire. I believe it's actually much simpler than that. I believe that we are simply not used to talking about Jesus. I actually believe this. We need to have spiritual conversations, not in church. Yes, we need to have spiritual conversations in church. We need to have some spiritual conversations not in church. Deuteronomy chapter 6. I told you we'd get to some scriptures. Deuteronomy chapter 6, verses 6 through 9. And these words, which I command you today, shall be in your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, when you lie down and when you rise up. You shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes. You shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. Man, it's a good Sunday when you get to use the word frontlets. When I got saved, everything was great and I loved it and everything, but I got saved young and I grew up in the church, and then I became a teenager, became an adult, and I got married, and we just had life, and life was good. And Tina and I were both Christians, and we went to church, and we would consider ourselves on fire Christians. But in our day-to-day living, we very rarely ever just talked about spiritual things. We didn't have the just deep spiritual conversations with each other. We really didn't talk about it. We talked a lot about, what are we doing? What's going on in our lives? We did talk a lot, particularly me. I talk a lot. I know they usually say women talk a lot more than men. That is not the case in our house. So I'm the talker. But we very rarely had spiritual conversations. And then, it's going up on to 5 years now, we came into Grace. And my real first interactions with this church was with Roger and Tim Downey. And Tim is, of course, now gone on taking a job at a different church, and we miss him greatly. But I won't ever really forget my first interactions where we were having conversations, and we would go back and forth from things like where should we eat for lunch and, what's just happening in the general state of things, to all of a sudden God is moving in my life and doing these amazing things, and tacos are just as good as hamburgers, and God is going to over here. And it was like this flow of the spiritual and the natural, like just meshed together, like there was no walls, there was no separation, and I didn't understand what is happening here. Like it was so ingrained in Pastor Roger that there was no separation of things. And for some reason, that bled into our house. And Tina and I just found ourselves having deep conversations. We would go on these walks that would last for an hour where we would talk about nothing else but what God is doing. And it began to change a lot of the things about us just because we were now openly talking about what God is doing in our lives and how we were responding to God and what is happening. And it didn't become this thing where that's like all we talked about. We still had to talk about, how are we paying for this thing, or what do you want to do this weekend, or did you ever mow the grass so we can not pay this fine? whatever other things had to come up. But we began to have these deep spiritual conversations, and that started really, really changing things with us.